So, the entire dev community has been on fire over this past week. And the reason is, well, complicated, but I'm going to try to give you a TLDR of what happened, what went wrong, and what should have happened in order for this to not be an issue at all. This is a heavily opinionated video by nature, and so if you have any disagreements with me over anything that I say, then please do leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer you as fast as possible. So let's get started. If you already know the TLDR of this story, then please do jump into this timestamp right here, as I'll try to explain broadly what happened. And give some context to the video. So if you've been on Twitter, if you've been on YouTube, if you've been in any social media where you follow people that talk about tech, then or software development in this case, then you probably already know about it and skip to that timestamp. So DHH, the creator of Ruby on Rails, runs an open source project called Turbo. And in sum, Turbo is a library that allows you to write less code for a single web app made with Ruby on Rails. Now, if you want to know more about it, then I'll leave links down below so that you can actually dig into it a bit more. Up until a week ago, Turbo used to use TypeScript for their source code. These all changed this week since DHH approved the PR and merged the PR into master. That basically removed TypeScript and everything that goes along with it, and some more, from the Turbo's source code. That's basically the main issue here. But it is not that TypeScript was removed. It was about how it was managed, how it was handled, how it was basically perceived by the entire community. Yeah, the PR got merged, TypeScript got removed, but what's the big fuss about it? After all, DHH is the main owner of the project, even though it is open source, so you might think that he can do just whatever he likes, right? Well, there's some issues with that I'm going to touch on later, but the main issue specifically with this PR is that basically the PR got created and merged within a 3-hour span, so the community was basically left unanswered and unheard, because let's imagine you go to bed and like 8 hours later you wake up and oh, like the entire dev community is on fire because TypeScript just got ejected out of Turbo. And on a technical level, there were a ton of issues. So I don't see any issue with removing TypeScript per se. There are a lot of developers that prefer JavaScript over TypeScript, and I'm going to touch on that later. The issue is that DHH basically merged a PR that didn't provide any single alternative. So there were no declaration files and there were no JS docs. Meaning, if you want to use Turbo right now, your IDE is going to be basically useless because it won't give you any hints of what parameters should be. It won't give you any type of error warnings on things that you are misusing from the Turbo library that with TypeScript you would have known about quite readily. On top of this, many other packages got removed that are not as important as having types, obviously, but they are really freaking important, especially if you're running an open source project, like Prettier. So Prettier allows you to format your code in a coherent way so that every single developer that contributes to the project will make sure that their code is exactly the same as any other developers when it comes to the formatting of it, and it got ditched. And there's no explanation for this. You can remove TypeScript and keep Prettier. Those two do not have to exist together, right? And so basically the entire process felt rushed to a point where it is actually kind of stupid. Then we get to the blog post that DHH made, which, I mean, as a developer that prefers to write JavaScript, I understand the position that DHH is coming from. However, the way he put that into words is frankly awful. Basically, the whole blog post felt an attack on the TypeScript developers instead of just being an explanation of why that was being done. So from calling the TypeScript community a tribe, which, I mean, let's face it, TypeScript is taking over JavaScript, whether you like it or not. More and more developers are jumping over to TypeScript. So that entire thing basically ignited on fire on social media because every single TypeScript developer basically felt attacked by the way that DHH phrased that blog post. And on top of this, DHH actually released a new blog post, and the title is Open Source, Oliganism, and the TypeScript Meltdown. And basically here he goes on a rant about how people that don't have anything to do with the Turbo project had a lot to say about him removing TypeScript. And I believe he completely missed the point. And he basically doubled down on the whole tribe sentiments that he was trying to convey in the first blog post. So basically, he called them dogmatic, again, calling them hooligans. That's not a way to go, doubling down on an already terrible statement like that. It's terrible. I recommend you read both blog posts fully so that you can understand that. So, what are the reasons behind removing TypeScript? And let's go back to the technical level of it and to the blog post most specifically. So there's one phrase in there that's, again, as a developer that prefers JavaScript, I can really understand and I can really get behind. So, and I'm going to read this just so that I don't get it wrong, but he says, things that should be easy become hard, and things that are hard become any. No thanks. And again, I understand the reasoning behind it. However, there's a difference between developing a project for yourself as a side project or maintaining an open source project that's used widely by many, many projects. You have to give the developers that are using your library a good way to interact with it. And TypeScript for that is really, really freaking awesome. Again, yes, you can replace that with JS docs and declaration files, and that's completely fine. However, provide that alternative. So basically what DHH is doing is he just removed the entire code related to TypeScript, any types, every single package related to TypeScript. And now I believe he's erring on the side of the community will create a types package so that any developer that wants to use TypeScript and that wants to have types in their IDE and wants to have warnings basically for things that he's doing wrong, they'll be able to install that package once it comes out. The issue is now. So now the project doesn't have anything. It doesn't have anything to guide the developers. And so basically, DHH solution is to say, okay, look, there's no types, but you can go into the web and look at the documentation. And I mean, that makes no sense because if you've ever developed a project that contained documentation, you know that the documentation is always behind the code. So anytime you look at the documentation, that is most likely deprecated in one page or another. And so relying on documentation that's external to the code makes no sense. It is not practical. So the goal should be that your IDE and the code that you are using gives you all the information that you need. And if you need some more details around what you are using, any function or whatever, then you go into the documentation and it should give you a broad look into the function, and it should give you some hints into how to use it. But the code should be the real winner here. The code should give you everything that you need in order to use the package. So yeah, apart from that, one of the main issues that DHH provided was that there's a compiler step involved in TypeScript. And like, dude, are you really going to complain because your code took 30 more seconds to reach master? That doesn't equate to any sort of reason within that phrase. And so that part, to me, kind of annoys me, to say the least. I understand, but like, it takes at least 30 seconds. It is not that long to wait for a compiler to run. And so even though every single language, whether it's TypeScript, JavaScript, Ruby, Java, C, whatever, every single one of them has their upsides and downsides, right? And so for me, it feels, and for the entire dev community, it feels like DHH didn't want to listen to the upsides or downsides of either JavaScript or TypeScript, just so that he could get his idea across. That felt self-righteous. That felt like he didn't really care about the community that supports the project and that actually uses the project. And that's an issue. And so, to reiterate, the issue is not that TypeScript got removed. The issue the main issue, better yet, is how it got removed. Let's imagine in a perfect world that that PR got created and DHH waited like 2, maybe 3 weeks for it to get merged. Then I can guarantee you we wouldn't have more than a handful of tweets about this, and I wouldn't be making this video. And Primogen wouldn't have made a video, and Theo wouldn't have made a video. All of them I highly recommend you watching. So if he had done it right, then all of these issues that I'm talking about right here, so the JS docs not existing in the code, no comments in the code, no declaration files, prettier getting removed, that would all have been addressed before it got merged. And so it wouldn't be an issue. So Svelte changed from TypeScript to JavaScript a while back, and that's fine. No one cared, like for the most part at least. But in this specific case, they cared because it was mismanaged, it was mishandled. So let's imagine again that the DHH would have waited a while. Then we would have a broad discussion on the subject. People would have analyzed the code and figured out that, okay, look, fine, but add JS docs, and we would have JS docs for that. No issues there, right? That would all have been fine. The issue was not that TypeScript got removed. The issue is how TypeScript got removed. Because right now, the entire experience for developers that will use the package will be worse, much worse. And I have zero questions about it, even though I'm probably never going to use it. Again, I'm referring to this as a JavaScript/TypeScript developer. So now into a bit more of an opinion on JavaScript versus TypeScript. Again, I prefer JavaScript. However, my personal opinion is that for big projects, especially, TypeScript makes a ton of sense. If you have like 100 developers working on your team, you have to make sure everyone can look at the code and understand exactly what it does and how to use it. You end up having way less issues, you end up having to refactor a lot less, you end up basically having a much more clean piece of software, even though you have to write more code. Now, obviously it has its hurdles. It's a bit slower to write on, and obviously having type issues is not that fun. However, it will avoid having issues in the future. So when it comes to me personally, if I'm doing a side project, I will always use JavaScript. It is faster, and I don't really care if it crashes from time to time, because I'm probably going to be the only user, as I'm a professional in doing userless applications. But like, if you are doing anything that involves money, involves someone paying for a product, then TypeScript makes a ton of sense. You basically guarantee that you won't have any crashes related to functions that should be functions but are in fact undefined. And that's really important. And you have to have a lot less checks than you would have if you had JavaScript. And especially when it comes to the backend versus front end. Like in the front end, depending on the project, I will still prefer to use JavaScript simply because, I mean, if an application crashes from 2 to 2 months for every single user, it's not that big of a deal. Now, and it isn't that big of a deal because it probably won't break anything related to the project in the bigger scheme of things. Now, if we are talking about the backend, then that's completely different. Like, you can really screw things up if you don't have strong types, because you can mess up data and you can mess up your infrastructure in a way that's not revertible. And for that, you have to be really sure that everything is typed as it should. So that's basically my opinion on the subject. It depends on the size of the project. It depends on the project itself. It depends on if it is the front end or the back end. However, TypeScript for big projects, for projects that actually have a lot of developers working on it, makes a ton of sense. And that DHH forgot to mention. So if you ever find yourself managing an open source project, I hope you take what DHH did as a rule book for what not to do. It was terrible, it was completely mismanaged, and yeah, he did build and create Ruby on Rails, but that doesn't give him the right to just dictates how everyone should behave. And on top of that, it doesn't give him the right to attack an entire community just because. So that's it. That's my rant on the subject. Again, if you disagree with me in any way, shape or form, then please do comment down below. I'm eager to know what you guys think about this. And yeah, watch Theo and the Primogen video on the subject. They go, they take a slightly different approach from what I talked about in this video. So yeah, also really interesting to hear what they have to say.